My name is Chloe Bolduc. I am the interim supervisor in the Maker and Innovation Lab at Pacific Science Center. It initially started with a story that I've told before about seeing an Instagram post and being very confused, honestly, that there was a person holding an antenna and the caption described talking to the ISS. At that time, and still very much so, I had a very strong passion for space and the ISS in particular, and so seeing that there was an option to contact the ISS, that post introduced me to the ARIS program, which is amateur radio on the International Space Station, and I knew that was something that I wanted to bring to my workplace because we all have a deep curiosity, especially for space. In August of 2024, Pacific Science Center hosted an ARIS Contact in our PACCAR IMAX theater, where we invited community members to come watch our youth development cohort that we had on site at the time interview an astronaut, Jeanette Epps, that was currently on the ISS. My call sign is N1BDX. A lot of people ask if I chose the N1 for any particular reason. No, I did seek out the BDX. My last name is Bolduc, but my whole family has gone by the artist name of Bolduc, so I was looking for some way to tie in the Bolducs there, and that was something that was available. It has honestly introduced me to a lot of opportunities that I just did not even know were out there. So being able to develop the curriculum for the ARIS Contact, leading up to the contact with the youth development cohort, we did things like built tape measure antennas, we did a fox hunt. I think that was a really unique way to come together and be able to practice new skills that were hard at first, that we felt a little unsure about, but seeing everybody try together just made it really fun. And beyond that, I was able to attend the ARRL Teachers Institute in Connecticut, and that was another opportunity that opened my eyes to even more ways to use amateur radio in educational settings that I was super excited to bring back to the Science Center. And it was really interesting having to adapt some of those lessons that were meant for a classroom where you could have people hands-on with radios, and having to think we have thousands of guests every day at the Science Center that not all of them can operate a radio. So it really pushed me to think outside of the box. We haven't done anything hands-on in the sense that we've brought it out for guests to interact with. We did a lot of planning and brainstorming of how to do that, but at the time it just did not seem possible. But that looked like using a Zoom spot, which is like a Wi-Fi device that allows people to talk to each other via radio all over the world. That looked like discussing flight paths and showing the different regions. So there were many ways that we tried to bring it out to the public, but it can get difficult to take the hands-on element out of it when that's the whole point of amateur radio, which is pretty unfortunate. Our department will be undergoing renovations, and while we're still in the prototyping stage, as we move out of that prototyping stage, it looks like locking in different forms of programming. So that looks like a wood shop, that looks like a digital textile lab, that could look like an amateur radio station in the future. It could look like a maker in residence style of programming where an amateur radio professional or hobbyist would come into the Science Center and engage with guests using their own background. But at the time, it's not in the plans to be every day on the floor as we were originally thinking. But we have what we call a incubator or startup in residence program, where things like organizations beyond just an individual person can also come in maybe once a week, maybe once a month, whenever works best for them. And they kind of table at that region over there. If you've heard of Seattle Universal Math Museum, they're growing right now in their influence in the community, and they started by tabling here. I think with our youth development cohort in particular, that really had the hands-on experience by building the tape measure antenna, by doing the fox hunt, by interviewing astronaut Jeanette Epps. I did think that push them, especially with the fox hunt and thinking about communication and connection. We had leaders that work at PacSci that not everybody gets to interact with very frequently because they're doing very important work behind the scenes, and they volunteered to go sit in Seattle Center and be the locations holding the transmitters for the teens to go find during their fox hunt. So that level of connection of seeking out somebody that they recognized but didn't always have the opportunity to connect with and have fun with failing a little bit and then succeeding too, I think was really fun. And that is the whole mission of Maker and Innovation Lab, is getting people comfortable with failure. And that happened a lot, especially when soldering the attenuator kits for the fox hunt. That was a very difficult process. As somebody who was brand new to soldering and failed on my own attenuator kit trying to teach other people that, you could see moments where they wished I had a little bit better instruction for them, but also they were willing to try it anyway and experiment. There has been interest. I think one thing that's prohibited anything going beyond that is the youth development cohort that we did have involved is no longer something that we offer at Pacific Science Center. So the teens that could advocate for it, that enjoyed the experience, unfortunately aren't here anymore. However, we've had a lot of groups and adults in particular ask if we want to come back and table at ARL's Field Day in June, if we want to share more about the impact that the AIRS contact had on PacSci. There's a lot of people asking about that impact, and I think that's something that will keep the interest going over time as it gets brought up again. I would say try to find parts that interest you. There are so many different ways that you can get involved and stay involved in amateur radio, whether that looks like emergency preparedness, whether that looks like being in the wilderness and helping people who are doing things like marathons and runs, whether that looks like being interested in planes and helping out with seafair. I think for me personally, something that always keeps me involved is how much amateur radio can help people and support people and connect people, and it can do that in a realm of different interests. And so sticking to that mission of connecting people and helping people, you can do that in many different ways. You don't need the highest technology to just give the stats of how runners are doing during a long marathon. You can do it in the way that just works the best. Something I do wish was more of a resource is, even though it is incredible that amateur radio is a hands-on hobby and potentially profession, that did prohibit PacSci from staying more involved and engaged with amateur radio, and I wish there were a few more resources out there for things like we wanted to turn it into more of an exhibit. So if the hands-on portion is something that prohibits people from getting involved, I would just urge people or ask people to think outside the box in that way and make your hobby or your interest or your profession as accessible to as many people as possible, and that'll continue spreading the word and getting people interested. For the love of ham radio.